Sometimes life strips away everything you thought you could count on, leaving you standing in an empty field with nothing but your child's hand in yours. For 54-year-old Aibeleen James, that moment came when she lost her husband, her job, and her home, all in the same devastating year. All she had left was her 10-year-old son Marcus and an old rusted school bus sitting forgotten in the Montana plains. Most people would see that bus as junk. Aibeleen saw it as a new beginning. With winter coming and nowhere else to go, this determined mother made a choice that seemed impossible. She decided to turn that broken-down bus into a home. Armed with her father's old toolbox and sheer determination, Aibeleen began a transformation that would surprise everyone. But how does a single mother with no building experience create something so remarkable that it would inspire millions around the world? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The toolbox had belonged to her father, Samuel Washington, a man who could fix anything with patience and the right approach. Aibeleen remembered watching him work on Saturday mornings in their garage in Detroit, his large hands gentle as he taught her to hold a wrench properly, to measure twice and cut once, to never force what wasn't meant to fit. "Baby girl," he'd say in that deep, steady voice, "tools don't make the craftsman. The craftsman makes the tools work." She was 8 years old then, standing on a milk crate to reach the workbench, more interested in the stories he told while working than the actual repairs. But somehow, without realizing it, she'd absorbed his lessons about persistence, about seeing solutions where others saw problems. Samuel had passed when Aibeleen was 19, leaving behind that worn wooden toolbox with its scratched exterior and carefully organized contents. Each tool had its place, wrapped in old cloth and labeled in his precise handwriting. At the bottom, beneath the measuring tape and level, she'd discovered a folded piece of paper with his words, "For my Aibeleen, when life breaks down, you got everything you need to fix it right here. Love, Daddy." She'd carried that toolbox through 2 moves, a marriage and the birth of her son. It had sat mostly unused in closets and garages, a sentimental keepsake rather than a practical necessity. Until now, Aibeleen's life before the collapse had been carefully constructed, each piece fitting together like a well-planned renovation. She'd met David James in 1998 at a community health fair where she was volunteering, drawn to his easy laugh, and the way he listened when she talked about her dreams of helping people. He was working construction then, steady work that kept food on the table and allowed them to save for a future. They married in 2000 in a small ceremony at her church, surrounded by friends who believed they were building something lasting. When Marcus arrived in 2015, completing their family later than most, but right on time for them, Aibeleen felt the deep satisfaction of a life unfolding according to plan. Her position as office manager at Riverside Medical Clinic had given her purpose beyond her family. For 12 years, she'd been the steady presence patients counted on, the voice on the phone who remembered their names and their struggles. Dr. Martinez often said she was the heart of the practice, the one who made scared patients feel safe and helped elderly clients navigate insurance paperwork with dignity intact. "Mrs. James always knows what to do," patients would say, and Aibeleen took pride in that reputation. She'd built relationships that stretched across generations, watching children grow up and helping their grandparents manage chronic conditions with grace. Marcus had thrived in this stable world. A bright boy with his mother's determination and his father's easy charm, he'd excelled in school while maintaining the kind of respectful curiosity that made teachers smile. He helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, read to younger children at the library, and spent evenings at the kitchen table, working through homework with the methodical persistence Aibeleen recognized as her father's legacy. The house in Billings had been their sanctuary, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a backyard big enough for Marcus's basketball hoop and Aibeleen's small garden. She'd painted every room herself, choosing colors that made each space feel warm and welcoming. The kitchen window looked out onto the street where neighborhood children played, and summer evenings often found their porch filled with friends sharing stories over sweet tea. David had been a good provider in those early years. His construction crew working steady jobs that kept them comfortable if not wealthy. He coached Marcus's little league team, attended every school event, and seemed to share Aibeleen's vision of a family rooted in community and mutual support. But somewhere along the way, small cracks had begun to show. David's weekend poker games stretched longer, and he became secretive about money in ways that made Aibeleen's stomach tighten with unspoken worry. Bills arrived that he claimed to have paid, and conversations about their savings account became tense exchanges that ended with him leaving the house for hours. Aibeleen's friend, Victor Brown, who worked as a paralegal at the law firm downtown, had been her college study partner before life took them in different directions. His practical mind and steady friendship had been a constant through her adult years, someone who listened without judgment and offered advice with the careful precision of his legal training. "I see it in my work all the time," he told her during one of their coffee meetings when she'd finally shared her concerns about David's behavior. Financial stress changes people, sometimes in ways they can't control. But you need to protect yourself and Marcus, Aibeleen. Hope for the best, but prepare for challenges. Anna Harris lived 3 houses down, a retired teacher whose husband had passed 5 years earlier. She'd become an unofficial neighborhood grandmother, the kind of woman who noticed when families were struggling and appeared with casseroles and practical help. Her friendship with Aibeleen had grown from casual waves across the yard to regular conversations over back-fence coffee, the kind of relationship that made a community feel like home. "You've got strength you haven't even discovered yet," Anna would say during their talks, her weathered hands steady as she poured coffee from her old percolator. "I've watched you handle crisis after crisis at that clinic, seen how you keep families together when everything's falling apart. Don't underestimate what you're capable of." James Smith had first entered their lives as Marcus's school counselor, a soft-spoken man whose genuine care for children made difficult conversations feel safe. When budget cuts eliminated his position, he'd moved to the county social services department, where his understanding of family dynamics and child welfare made him an advocate rather than an adversary for families facing challenges. Their paths had crossed again when Aibeleen needed to update Marcus's school records during a brief period when David's employment status was uncertain. James's calm professionalism and obvious concern for Marcus's well-being had impressed her, and she'd filed away the knowledge that he was someone who truly understood the complexities of keeping families stable in unstable times. These relationships, Victor's steady counsel, Anna's nurturing wisdom, James's professional compassion, formed the foundation of support that Aibeleen hadn't fully appreciated until everything else began to crumble. They represented the kind of community connections her father had always emphasized, the network of mutual care that could sustain people through seasons of difficulty. In those final months before the collapse, Aibeleen had maintained her routine, with increasing determination, as if consistency alone could hold their world together. She arrived at the clinic early, stayed late, and threw herself into her work with the focused energy of someone trying to outrun approaching storm clouds. Marcus, with the intuitive sensitivity of children who've learned to read adult moods, had begun offering small gestures of comfort without being asked. He'd set the table for dinner without prompting, completed homework without supervision, and found reasons to spend time in whatever room his mother occupied, as if his presence alone could provide the stability their family needed. Evening conversations over homework had become their shared refuge, moments when Aibeleen could focus on Marcus's growing mind and forget the mounting pressures that waited in the stack of bills on her dresser. His questions about science projects and book reports reminded her of the future they were building together, the investment in his education that would carry him toward opportunities she and David had dreamed about during those hopeful early years of marriage. But even in the midst of growing uncertainty, Aibeleen had maintained her faith in the power of hard work and careful planning to overcome temporary setbacks. She'd weathered difficulties before, had seen other families in her community survive financial stress and come out stronger on the other side. The toolbox remained in the hall closet, waiting with patient dignity for the moment when its true purpose would finally be revealed. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, the red stamp marking final notice, as stark as a death certificate against the white paper. Aibeleen stood in her kitchen doorway, still, holding her coffee cup, reading the words that made her careful world official wreckage. She'd known this moment was coming. The phone calls from the bank had grown more frequent, David's promises more desperate, and the stack of unopened bills on their bedroom dresser had grown thick enough that she'd stopped pretending they might contain good news. But seeing their address printed in legal language, with a date circled in red, 30 days to vacate the premises, made everything terrifyingly real. David had been gone for 3 days this time, his absence marked by the truck missing from their driveway and the silence that filled spaces where his voice should have been. When he finally returned that evening, his eyes were red with exhaustion and something that looked like defeat. "I can fix this," he said. The same words he'd been repeating for months, but his voice carried no conviction, and when Aibeleen showed him the eviction notice, he crumpled into their kitchen chair like a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. The truth came out in pieces over the following days. The second mortgage he'd taken without telling her. The credit cards maxed out to cover gambling debts that kept growing instead of disappearing. The construction jobs that had dried up months ago while he kept leaving each morning, sitting in coffee shops and casino parking lots, instead of admitting he had nowhere to go. "I thought I could win it back," he said during one of their late-night conversations, his words carrying the hollow echo of promises that had already been broken too many times. Just needed one good streak, just needed things to turn around. Aibeleen listened with the weary patience of someone watching a loved one drown while being too far away to help. Part of her wanted to rage at the deception, at the years of careful budgeting and planning that had been gambled away without her knowledge. But a larger part simply felt tired, as if the energy required for anger had been used up by months of trying to hold their family together with hope and determination alone. The call came from Dr. Martinez on a Thursday afternoon while she was organizing patient files, losing herself in the familiar routine of administrative work. Budget cuts at the clinic meant eliminating 2 positions, and despite her 12 years of dedicated service, the decision had been made with the cold mathematics of financial necessity. "You're not just an employee, Aibeleen," Dr. Martinez said, her voice heavy with genuine regret. "You're family to all of us, but the insurance reimbursements keep shrinking, and we simply cannot keep everyone on. 2 weeks severance pay and a letter of recommendation seemed inadequate compensation for 12 years of being the steady presence that held the clinic together. But Aibeleen accepted both, with the dignity that had defined her approach to every challenge, thanking Dr. Martinez for the opportunities she'd been given and promising to train her replacement with the same thoroughness she brought to everything else. The conversation with Marcus was the hardest part of those terrible days. 10 years old and accustomed to stability, he absorbed the news of their changing circumstances with the careful attention he gave to everything important. "Are we going to be homeless, Mom?" he asked, his young voice steady, but his eyes showing the fear that childhood shouldn't have to contain. "We're going to be different," Aibeleen replied, choosing her words with the precision of someone who understood that truth, delivered with love, was better than false reassurance. "We're going to have to be creative and brave, and we're going to have to take care of each other in new ways." She'd started looking for another job immediately, but positions for someone with her experience were scarce. In a town where medical practices were consolidating and administrative roles were being eliminated rather than created. The few interviews she managed yielded polite rejections and promises to keep your resume on file that felt like gentle dismissals of a life's work. Friends and family offered help with the generous hearts of people who understood sudden hardship. Anna Harris insisted they were welcome to stay in her spare bedroom as long as needed. Victor Brown researched legal options for delaying the foreclosure and offered to loan the money he probably couldn't afford to lose. Church members organized food drives and job search assistance with the loving persistence of a community that refused to let its members fall through the cracks. But charity, no matter how lovingly offered, felt like a temporary solution to a problem that required permanent transformation. Aibeleen found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom she'd painted soft blue when they first moved in, trying to imagine a future that made sense for herself and Marcus. The school bus appeared during one of her desperate drives through rural areas outside Billings, searching for rental properties they might somehow afford on unemployment benefits and the small savings account David hadn't managed to drain. She'd been following back roads with a newspaper full of classified ads, investigating addresses that turned out to be either too expensive or too run down to be viable options for a mother and child. The bus sat in a field 20 miles outside town, its yellow paint faded to the color of old sunflowers and rust spreading across its surface like a slow-motion fire. A for sale sign in the front window showed a phone number and a price that seemed impossibly low, $800 for what had once been a vehicle capable of transporting dozens of children to school each morning. Aibeleen parked her car beside the county road and walked through tall grass to examine what might be either their salvation or another dead end in her search for solutions. The bus was longer than she'd expected, 36 feet of potential living space if someone could see past the broken windows and years of neglect. The door opened with a squeal of protest, revealing an interior that smelled of rust and abandonment, but offered something precious: possibility. The driver's seat was cracked but stable, the aisle clear of debris, and the afternoon light streaming through dirty windows illuminated a space that could, with enough work and imagination, become a home. Not the kind of home she'd planned to provide for Marcus, but perhaps the kind of home that could teach them both about resilience and the difference between what they wanted and what they actually needed. She called the number that evening, speaking with a farmer who'd used the bus to transport seasonal workers before investing in newer vehicles. He was willing to accept monthly payments and offered to help arrange delivery to whatever location she chose. His matter-of-fact kindness reminded her of her father's approach to helping neighbors, practical assistance offered without judgment or lengthy explanations. David returned home the night she signed the papers for the bus, finding her at the kitchen table with legal documents spread around her like the pieces of a puzzle she was determined to solve. His reaction was what she'd expected, a mixture of disbelief and desperation that made him sound like someone trying to talk her down from a dangerous ledge. "You can't be serious about this," he said, his voice carrying the edge of panic that had become familiar during their worst conversations. "A bus? Aibeleen, we have a child to think about." "I am thinking about our child," she replied, her words steady with the conviction that had been building throughout the week. "I'm thinking about showing him that people don't have to be victims of their circumstances, that we can create something good even when everything falls apart." He was gone by morning, leaving behind only a note that apologized for everything without promising anything, and the silence of someone who'd chosen running over staying to help clean up the wreckage. Aibeleen found Marcus standing at the kitchen window, watching the empty driveway, with the stoic acceptance of a child who'd learned not to expect adults to keep their promises. "It's going to be just us now," she said, putting her arm around his shoulders and feeling the steady strength. of his presence beside her. "I know, Mom," he replied, leaning into her embrace with trust that made her heart ache and her determination solidify. "When do we get to see our bus?" The first night they spent in the bus, parked in a field under October stars, was cold and uncomfortable and absolutely terrifying. They'd brought sleeping bags, a Coleman lantern, and sandwiches wrapped in aluminum foil, camping equipment that seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what they were attempting. But as Aibeleen lay listening to Marcus's steady breathing beside her, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The quiet satisfaction of having chosen action over surrender, of moving toward an unknown future instead of waiting for circumstances to crush what remained of their hopes. The toolbox sat near the driver's seat, ready for morning, and the work that would transform this rusty shell into something worthy of the faith her son had placed in her ability to make impossible things possible. The first YouTube video lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Recorded on Anna Harris's old smartphone with shaky camera work that captured more of Aibeleen's boots than her actual progress. She'd never imagined herself as someone who made videos, but documenting their work felt important, a way of holding herself accountable to the impossible project she'd committed them both to undertaking. "Day one of turning this old school bus into our home," she said to the camera, her voice uncertain but determined. The lens caught her father's toolbox open on the bus floor, tools spread around her like surgical instruments prepared for a delicate operation. Marcus appeared at the edge of the frame, his 10-year-old face serious with concentration as he held a measuring tape against the window frame they were trying to repair. "We don't really know what we're doing," Aibeleen continued, her honesty making the video feel more like a conversation than a performance. "But we're going to figure it out as we go, because sometimes that's all you can do." The learning curve was steeper than she'd anticipated. YouTube tutorials made insulation installation look straightforward until she found herself wrestling with fiberglass batting in the cramped confines of the bus interior, discovering that every surface was either curved or angled in ways that defied standard construction wisdom. Marcus proved to be an invaluable assistant, his small hands able to reach spaces that frustrated his mother and his natural problem-solving ability evident in solutions she wouldn't have considered. "What if we cut it in strips instead of trying to fit the whole piece?" he suggested during their first attempt at insulating the walls, his matter-of-fact tone reminding Aibeleen of her father's practical approach to engineering challenges. The salvage yard on the outskirts of Billings became their treasure-hunting ground, a sprawling landscape of discarded materials that contained everything they needed if they could recognize opportunity disguised as someone else's unwanted debris. Tom Rodriguez, the owner, was a weathered man in his 60s who'd spent decades turning other people's waste into resources for those creative enough to see potential in the discarded. "You've got good instincts," he told Aibeleen after watching her evaluate a stack of reclaimed lumber, testing each board for soundness and measuring carefully before making decisions. "Most people want everything new and perfect, but there's character in materials that have already lived through something." He offered them favorable prices and access to his workshop tools, seeming to understand, without lengthy explanation, that this project represented more than home improvement. It was about survival and dignity, and teaching a child that resourcefulness could triumph over circumstances that looked impossible to overcome. The first major victory came when they successfully installed new glass in 3 of the bus windows, replacing broken panes with salvaged pieces that didn't match perfectly, but allowed light to stream into their living space without the constant whistle of wind through cracks. Marcus insisted on helping with every step, from measuring and cutting, glazing compound, to carefully positioning each piece of glass while his mother secured it in place. "We did that, Mom," he said, stepping back to admire their work with the satisfaction of someone who understood that accomplishment was sweeter when it resulted from genuine effort. "We actually fixed something that was broken. But for every success, there were setbacks that tested their determination and highlighted how much they still didn't know. The roof leaked during their first serious rainstorm, turning their careful organization into a scramble for buckets and tarps, while water found every weak point in their amateur repairs. Electrical work proved more complicated than the tutorial suggested, resulting in blown fuses and the frightening realization that some mistakes could be dangerous rather than merely inconvenient. Aibeleen found herself working by flashlight. After Marcus had fallen asleep, studying wiring diagrams and construction manuals with the focused intensity of someone taking a correspondence course in subjects she'd never imagined needing to master. Her hands, soft from years of administrative work, developed calluses and small scars that marked her transformation from office manager to builder of their impossible dream. The second video, posted a week after the first, showed their progress on interior framing, 2x4 studs that would support walls and create separate living areas within the bus's long, narrow space. Aibeleen's voice was more confident now, explaining their decisions and sharing mistakes with the openness of someone who discovered that vulnerability could be a form of strength. We had to redo this whole section because I measured wrong. The first time, she admitted to the camera, showing the gap where a wall should have fit precisely. But Marcus reminded me that making mistakes is how you learn to do things right the next time. The video attracted 43 views and 6 comments, responses from strangers who offered encouragement and shared their own stories of overcoming difficult circumstances through determination and creativity. One comment from a user named Building Hope 2020 became particularly meaningful. Your courage is inspiring my family to tackle projects we've been afraid to start. Thank you for showing us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Food remained a constant concern, with their limited budget requiring careful planning and creative solutions that stretched ingredients into meals substantial enough for a growing boy and a woman doing physical labor. Anna Harris appeared regularly, with casseroles and fresh vegetables from her garden, her contributions offered with the casual grace of someone who understood that accepting help required as much dignity as providing it. Victor Brown visited most evenings after work, bringing legal documents related to their housing situation and staying to help with construction tasks that required multiple people. His practical mind proved invaluable for solving problems that seemed insurmountable to someone learning carpentry through trial and error. You're actually doing it, he said one evening, while helping install a partition that would create Marcus's and bedroom area. I wasn't sure this was possible when you first told me about it, but you're actually creating something beautiful here. The physical work was transforming Aibeleen in ways she hadn't expected. Her arms grew stronger from lifting and positioning materials, her back more flexible from crawling into tight spaces to run wiring and secure insulation. But the mental transformation was even more profound. She was discovering capabilities she'd never been required to develop, solving problems that required both analytical thinking and intuitive understanding of how materials and spaces worked. Together, Marcus thrived in this environment of constant learning and practical challenge. His homework was completed at a makeshift desk constructed from salvaged wood, and his conversations with classmates increasingly featured stories of their bus project rather than complaints about their unusual living situation. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, called to express concern about his housing stability, but ended the conversation expressing admiration for the independence and problem-solving skills he was developing. He's not just academically gifted, she told Aibeleen during their conference. He's developing the kind of practical intelligence and resilience that will serve him well throughout his life. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Evening routine in the bus involved reviewing the day's progress, planning tomorrow's tasks, and sharing what they'd learned through trial and error. Marcus had begun keeping a notebook of construction techniques and problem-solving strategies, documenting their journey with the careful attention to detail he'd inherited from his mother's administrative background. "We're getting good at this," he observed one night as they prepared for bed in their partially completed home, the smell of sawdust and possibility filling the air around them. "I think Grandpa Samuel would be proud of what we're building with his tools." Aibeleen looked around at their work. Rough walls beginning to define living spaces, windows that let in morning light without letting in weather, and the steady progress of two people refusing to be defeated by circumstances that had initially seemed impossible to overcome. Her father's toolbox sat nearby, each implement finding daily use in hands that were learning to create solutions where none had existed before. "I think he'd be proud of the builders we're becoming," she replied, understanding for the first time. That home was something you created through effort and intention, not something you simply moved into when you could afford the rent. Marcus's hand-drawn floor plans covered every available surface in what would eventually become their living room. Sketches that showed a 10-year-old's understanding of how people move through spaces and what they needed to feel comfortable in their own home. His drawings included details that surprised Aibeleen with their thoughtfulness. A reading nook near the largest window, storage solutions that maximized every inch of available space, and a kitchen area positioned to catch morning sunlight. "I want my bedroom to be back here," he explained, pointing to the rear section of the bus where his architectural vision included built-in bookshelves and a desk positioned beneath a window. "And maybe we could put your bed up there," he added, indicating the area above the driver's seat where a loft could provide privacy while maximizing floor space. His enthusiasm for the design process was infectious, turning evening planning sessions into collaborative explorations of possibility. Aibeleen found herself seeing their project through his eyes, not as a desperate response to homelessness, but as an opportunity to create something uniquely suited to their needs and dreams. The sleeping area took shape over several weeks of careful construction, with Marcus serving as chief assistant and quality control inspector. They built a platform bed from salvaged lumber, reinforcing the structure until it could support both their weight and the storage boxes that would slide beneath it. The mattress came from a thrift store, not new, but clean and comfortable enough for the sleep they needed between long days of construction work. Learning basic electrical systems proved more challenging than carpentry, requiring patience and caution that slowed their progress but ensured their safety. Aibeleen spent hours studying circuit diagrams and watching tutorials, determined to understand not just how to connect wires, but why electrical systems worked the way they did. The knowledge felt empowering, another skill that expanded her sense of what was possible when necessity drove learning. "Mom, you're getting really good at this," Marcus observed while holding a flashlight steady as she connected their first functional light switch. The simple circuit that illuminated their workspace represented weeks of study and careful practice. But the accomplishment felt monumental when electricity flowed where they had directed it. Their online audience was growing slowly but steadily, with each new video attracting viewers who found inspiration in watching two people refuse to accept defeat. Comments came from across the country. Single parents facing their own housing challenges, families downsizing by choice rather than necessity, and retirees exploring alternative living arrangements that prioritized freedom over traditional comfort. One comment particularly moved Aibeleen. "I'm a 67-year-old grandmother raising my grandson after my daughter died. Watching your videos gives me hope that we can create a stable home even when everything seems impossible. Thank you for sharing your journey." The financial pressure remained constant despite their growing resourcefulness. Aibeleen found work cleaning offices in the early morning hours, a job that paid cash and allowed her to maintain their construction schedule during daylight hours. The physical demands were exhausting, but the income covered their basic needs and allowed them to purchase materials that couldn't be salvaged or substituted. Marcus adapted to their routine with the resilience that children often display when Their security depends on flexibility. He completed homework by battery-powered lantern when necessary, helped with construction tasks that matched his abilities, and never complained about the unconventional childhood that circumstances had created for him. "I like living different than other kids," he told his mother one evening while they shared a dinner of soup and sandwiches at their makeshift table. "It feels like we're pioneers or something, like we're figuring out how to live in a way nobody else has tried." The community response to their project was mixed, revealing the complex attitudes people held toward poverty and unconventional solutions to housing challenges. Some neighbors expressed admiration for their determination and resourcefulness, offering materials and assistance with genuine respect for what they were attempting to accomplish. But others viewed the bus as evidence of declining property values and inappropriate living arrangements for a child. Phone calls to social services resulted in visits from caseworkers who arrived with clipboards and concerns about educational stability and adequate living conditions. James Smith, now working in family services, conducted the official inspection with professional thoroughness tempered by genuine care for Marcus's well-being. He examined their living arrangements, reviewed Marcus's school performance, and interviewed both mother and son about their satisfaction with their current situation. "This is unconventional," he admitted to Aibeleen after completing his evaluation. "But it's also clearly a home where a child is loved, educated, and provided with stability. Marcus is thriving academically and socially, and your construction work shows remarkable skill and attention to safety." His report classified their housing as adequate and praised Aibeleen's resourcefulness in creating appropriate living conditions. Under challenging circumstances, the official approval felt like validation of their choices and protection against future challenges to their unconventional lifestyle. Anna Harris organized a neighborhood meeting to address concerns about the bus and introduce people to the reality of what Aibeleen and Marcus were creating. Her living room filled with curious neighbors who arrived expecting to discuss property values, but left with admiration for the craftsmanship and ingenuity they witnessed. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 32 years, Anna addressed the group, "and I've never seen anyone work harder to create something beautiful and functional than Aibeleen is doing with that bus. We should be supporting her efforts, not complaining about them." The meeting resulted in unexpected assistance from neighbors who offered materials, tools, and expertise that accelerated their progress. Bob Mackenzie, a retired electrician, volunteered to inspect their wiring and suggest improvements. Linda Foster, whose husband had been a plumber, provided guidance on installing their water system safely and efficiently. Winter was approaching with the relentless certainty of Montana weather, adding urgency to their insulation and heating plans. They researched wood-burning stoves designed for small spaces, calculating ventilation requirements and heat output with the precision of people whose comfort and safety depended on making correct decisions. The stove installation required professional assistance, but Tom Rodriguez from the salvage yard connected them with a heating contractor who appreciated their careful preparation and offered labor costs that fit their limited budget. The first fire in their new stove filled the bus with warmth and the smoky aroma of burning wood, transforming their metal shell into something that felt genuinely home-like. "We did it, Mom," Marcus said, as they sat beside their stove on the first cold evening. Homework spread between them, and the satisfaction of accomplishment warming them as effectively as the fire. "We actually built ourselves a real home," Aibeleen watched her son's face in the flickering light, seeing contentment and pride that no conventional housing arrangement could have provided. Their bus represented more than shelter. It was evidence of their ability to create solutions, to transform seemingly impossible circumstances into opportunities for growth and discovery. The fifth video in their series showed the nearly completed interior, with walls painted in colors that made the narrow space feel larger and more welcoming. Aibeleen's narration was confident now, her explanations detailed enough to help other people undertake similar projects, while maintaining the personal tone that made viewers feel like participants in their journey rather than mere observers. 6 months ago, this was a rusty old bus that nobody wanted, she told the camera, panning across their kitchen area with its handmade cabinets and carefully installed appliances. But with enough determination and willingness to learn, two people can create something beautiful and functional from materials that other people threw away. The video ended with Marcus demonstrating the reading nook he'd designed, a cozy corner. With built-in shelves and cushions made from fabric, Anna Harris had contributed. His explanation of how they'd positioned the area to catch afternoon sunlight showed architectural thinking that impressed viewers and generated comments from professional builders who praised their innovative use of limited space. Their subscriber count had grown to over 500 people, a community of supporters who followed their progress with investment that felt personal and encouraging. Messages arrived from families undertaking their own alternative housing projects, from professionals offering advice and resources, and from individuals who found inspiration in watching two people refuse to accept defeat. The online attention was beginning to attract interest beyond their immediate community. A blogger who wrote about sustainable living shared their story with her readers, and a regional newspaper contacted Aibeleen about featuring their project in an upcoming article about creative responses to housing challenges. But success brought its own complications. Their growing visibility attracted both supporters and critics, people who viewed their unconventional lifestyle as either inspiring or inappropriate. The attention felt overwhelming sometimes, turning their personal journey into a public story with stakes that extended beyond their own survival and happiness. Evening conversations now included discussions about privacy and publicity, about the responsibility they felt toward people who looked to them for inspiration and guidance. Marcus, with the wisdom that children sometimes display in complex situations, offered perspective that helped his mother navigate these new challenges. "We're still just us," he pointed out during one of their planning sessions. "We're still just a mom and kid who needed a place to live and figured out how to build one. The people watching our videos can learn from what we did, but they have to make their own decisions about what's right for their families." His words reminded Aibeleen that their primary obligation was to continue creating the stable, loving home they both deserved, regardless of who was watching or what opinions others held about their choices. The toolbox that had started this journey still sat ready for daily use, its contents growing more familiar as she developed the skills that transformed her from user of tools into craftsperson capable of creating solutions where none had existed before. The solar panel system sprawled across the bus roof like a patchwork quilt of energy independence, each panel salvaged from different sources and wired together with the patient precision of someone who understood that mistakes could be expensive and dangerous. Aibeleen had spent weeks studying photovoltaic systems, learning about voltage and amperage and battery storage with the focused determination of someone whose comfort and safety depended on getting the technical details exactly right. "Mom, you're like a scientist now," Marcus observed, while helping position the final panel, his small hands steady as he held the mounting bracket in place. "You understand electricity and construction and all kinds of things you never learned in school." The moment when their first LED light illuminated, powered by sunlight, they had captured and stored felt like magic, even though Aibeleen understood the physics that made it possible. Standing in their home as evening darkness fell outside, while electricity flowed from batteries charged by the day's solar collection, represented a level of self-sufficiency she had never imagined achieving. "We did it," she whispered, flipping the switch again just to watch the light respond to her command. "We actually built ourselves a power system that works." The technical accomplishment was significant, but the emotional impact was even greater. They were no longer dependent on anyone else for the basic necessities of modern life. Their home generated its own electricity, stored its own water, and provided warmth from wood they could gather themselves. The independence felt profound and liberating in ways that went beyond practical considerations. Marcus was excelling in school despite the curiosity and sometimes concern of teachers and administrators who struggled to understand how a child, living in a converted bus, could demonstrate such academic achievement and emotional stability. His test scores remained consistently high, his behavior exemplary, and his interactions with classmates showed none of the social difficulties that adults expected from his unconventional living situation. "He's actually one of our most confident and capable students," his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, confided during a parent conference. "There's a maturity and problem-solving ability that I rarely see in children his age. Whatever environment you're providing, it's fostering remarkable development." The online community surrounding their videos had grown to include thousands of subscribers who followed their progress with invested interest that sometimes felt overwhelming. Comments arrived from around the world: families in Australia exploring tiny home construction, single mothers in England facing housing challenges, and retirees across America considering alternative living arrangements that prioritized freedom over conventional comfort. Their subscriber count had reached 1,500 people, a number that represented real humans choosing to spend time watching their story unfold. The responsibility felt heavier now that their audience included people making life-changing decisions based partly on what they witnessed in Aibeleen and Marcus's journey. Local media attention was intensifying as their story spread through social networks and word-of-mouth recommendation. The regional newspaper had published a feature article that resulted in interview requests from radio stations and television programs interested in their unconventional approach to housing challenges. Each media appearance brought new viewers to their channel and expanded their influence beyond what either of them had anticipated. But success brought complications that tested their commitment to privacy and authentic storytelling. Producers contacted them about television appearances that promised exposure but required traveling away from their home and construction projects. Corporate sponsors offered payment for product endorsements that could provide financial security, but might compromise the genuine tone that made their content meaningful to viewers. "We started making videos to help other people learn from what we were doing," Aibeleen explained to Marcus during one of their evening planning sessions. "But now it feels like the videos might be becoming more important than the actual building we're doing. Maybe we just keep doing what we've been doing," Marcus suggested, with the straightforward wisdom that children often bring to complicated situations. "People can watch if they want to, but we don't have to change what we're doing just because more people are paying attention." The Housing Authority visit came on a Tuesday morning in February. Two officials in county vehicles who arrived with clipboards and concerns about building codes and residential regulations. Aibeleen had been expecting this confrontation since their media coverage had increased, understanding that their growing visibility would eventually attract official attention to their unconventional living arrangement. The inspection was thorough and professional, covering electrical systems, plumbing installations, structural modifications, and safety equipment with the detailed attention of people whose job was protecting public welfare through regulatory compliance. Aibeleen walked them through each system, explaining her research and showing permits she had obtained for work that required professional certification. "This is actually quite impressive," the senior inspector admitted after examining their electrical panel and solar installation. "You've clearly invested significant time in understanding the technical requirements, and the craftsmanship is better than we see in many conventional homes." But regulations were regulations, and their bus did not meet all the requirements for permanent residential occupancy in their current location. The officials were respectful but firm about the legal challenges that would need to be addressed for them to continue living in their converted vehicle. Victor Brown's legal expertise proved invaluable in navigating the regulatory maze that surrounded alternative housing arrangements. He researched zoning laws, building codes, and precedent cases that might support their right to continue living in their carefully constructed home. His findings were mixed, some regulations that seemed insurmountable, others that might be satisfied through modifications or official variances. "The law isn't designed for people doing what you're doing," he explained during one of their strategy meetings. "But that doesn't mean what you're doing is illegal. It just means we need to find creative ways to satisfy requirements that were written for conventional housing situations." Anna Harris organized community support that proved more powerful than any legal argument. Her petition drive gathered signatures from neighbors who had witnessed their project firsthand and could testify to their positive impact on the community. Letters of support arrived from Marcus's teachers, from customers at businesses where Aibeleen worked, and from people who had followed their story through media coverage. "They're not just good neighbors," Anna testified at the county commissioner meeting where their case was heard. "They're an inspiration to anyone who believes that hard work and determination can overcome difficult circumstances. Forcing them to leave would send the wrong message about what our community values." The legal resolution came through compromise that satisfied regulatory requirements while allowing them to continue their chosen lifestyle. Their bus could remain on private property with appropriate permits, connected to approved utilities, and subject to periodic inspections that ensured ongoing compliance with safety standards. James Smith's professional support proved crucial during the bureaucratic process. His documentation of Marcus's academic and social development provided evidence that their living situation was not only adequate but actively beneficial for child development. His testimony carried the weight of someone whose job was protecting children's welfare. "In 20 years of working with families," he told the commissioners, "I've rarely seen a child who demonstrates the confidence, problem-solving ability, and emotional maturity that Marcus shows. His mother has created an environment that fosters exceptional development through hands-on learning and genuine responsibility." The victory celebration was quiet but deeply meaningful, shared around their handmade table while wind rattled the solar panels that powered the lights illuminating their meal. They had defended their right to live differently, to create solutions that worked for their specific needs, rather than conforming to conventional expectations about what constituted appropriate housing. "We can stay," Marcus said, his words carrying relief and pride that reflected months of uncertainty about their future. "We can keep building and improving and making this place exactly what we want it to be." Their YouTube channel had grown to include followers from dozens of countries, people who found inspiration in watching two Americans refuse to accept defeat when circumstances seemed impossible to overcome. Messages arrived daily from viewers, undertaking their own alternative housing projects, from families facing their own financial challenges, and from individuals who simply found hope in watching determination triumph over adversity. The global reach of their story was humbling and occasionally overwhelming. Knowing that people across the world were making life decisions influenced by their example felt like responsibility that extended far beyond their original goal of simply creating a safe home for themselves. Winter had tested their construction decisions and proved the effectiveness of their insulation, heating, and electrical systems. Snow piled around their bus without creating drafts or moisture problems, and their wood stove maintained comfortable temperatures even during the coldest Montana nights. The seasonal challenges they had prepared for months to face had been successfully overcome through careful planning and quality construction. Spring brought new projects and expanded possibilities. Their success with the bus renovation had generated offers of work from neighbors and acquaintances who wanted help with their own construction projects. Aibeleen's skills had developed to the level where people sought her advice on technical problems, and hired her for jobs that required both craftsmanship and problem-solving ability. "You've become a real contractor," Victor observed, while examining a deck repair project she had completed for elderly neighbors. "6 months ago, you were learning which end of a hammer to hold, and now you're solving construction problems that stump people with years of experience." The transformation felt gradual from the inside, but dramatic when viewed from the perspective of someone who had known her before their housing crisis began. She was stronger physically, more confident in her problem-solving abilities, and possessed technical skills that opened employment opportunities she had never considered pursuing. Marcus's role in their construction projects had evolved from assistant to partner, his understanding of building techniques and material properties impressive for someone his age. His architectural drawings had grown more sophisticated, incorporating engineering principles he had learned through hands-on experience with structural problems and solutions. "I want to be an architect when I grow up," he announced one evening. While working on plans for a chicken coop, they were considering adding to their property. But not the kind who just draws pictures, the kind who actually builds the things he designs. Their story was inspiring similar projects across the country as families facing housing challenges discovered that creative solutions could provide not just shelter, but genuine homes that reflected their values and priorities. The community of alternative housing enthusiasts that had grown around their videos included teachers, retired professionals, young families, and individuals from every economic background who shared interest in sustainable, affordable, self-sufficient living arrangements. The community donation box sat overflowing beside their front door, a wooden crate that had become a symbol of how individual struggle could resonate with universal human experience. Materials arrived daily: lumber from construction sites, electrical supplies from contractors, and tools from people who had heard their story and wanted to contribute to something they recognized as important and meaningful. "Look at this," Marcus said on a morning when they discovered the box filled with new donations, his voice carrying wonder at the generosity of strangers who had become invested in their success. "People we don't even know are helping us build our home." The contents represented more than material assistance. They were evidence of a community that extended far beyond their physical neighbors to include people around the world who found inspiration in watching two individuals refuse to accept defeat. Letters accompanied many donations, sharing stories of similar struggles and expressing gratitude for the hope their videos provided during difficult times. Money arrived in small amounts that accumulated into significant assistance. $20 from a retired teacher in Ohio, $50 from a single mother in California, $15 from a teenager who had been saving for a video game but decided their project was more important. Each contribution felt like a vote of confidence in their ability to create something meaningful from circumstances that had initially seemed hopeless. The viral breakthrough came with a video titled "Building Hope from Scratch," recorded on Marcus's 11th birthday as they celebrated in the completed living space they had created together. The camera captured their handmade table set with a small cake, decorations made from materials salvaged during construction, and the quiet satisfaction of people who had accomplished something they could be genuinely proud of. 11 months ago we had nothing, Aibeleen said to the camera, her voice steady with emotion that reflected the magnitude of their journey. We were homeless, broke, and scared about what would happen to us. But we had tools, and we had each other, and we decided that was enough to start building something better. The video's view count exploded overnight, shared across social media platforms by viewers who found their story inspiring enough to pass along to friends and family. Comments poured in from around the world, messages of support, questions about construction techniques, and stories from other families facing similar challenges who found hope in watching their transformation unfold. Within a week, their subscriber count had grown to over 10,000 people, a number that represented real individuals choosing to follow their journey and invest emotionally in their success. The responsibility felt overwhelming at times, understanding that their choices and words were influencing decisions being made by families they would never meet. Corporate sponsorship offers arrived with increasing frequency as their audience expanded and their influence grew. Companies specializing in solar equipment, tiny home supplies, and construction tools wanted to associate their products with the authentic inspiration their story provided. The financial opportunities were substantial, promising security that could eliminate their ongoing concerns about basic necessities. "We could probably make enough money from these sponsorships that you wouldn't have to clean offices anymore," Marcus observed while reviewing one particularly lucrative offer during their evening planning session. "But would that change why people watch our videos?" His question highlighted the tension between financial opportunity and authentic storytelling that had made their content meaningful to viewers seeking genuine inspiration rather than commercial entertainment. The companies offering sponsorships were interested in their influence, not necessarily in supporting their mission of helping other families create affordable housing solutions. Local speaking engagements began arriving as their story spread. Through community networks and media coverage, service clubs, church groups, and educational organizations invited Aibeleen to share their experience with audiences who wanted to understand how determination and resourcefulness could triumph over seemingly impossible circumstances. Her first presentation to the Rotary Club was nervously delivered but enthusiastically received, with questions that revealed how their story had challenged assumptions about poverty, housing, and the relationship between material possessions and genuine security. The standing ovation felt like validation, not just of their construction achievements, but of the values that had guided their decisions throughout their journey. "You've given us a different way to think about what it means to have enough," one audience member commented after her presentation. "Watching what you've accomplished with limited resources makes me question whether the abundance I think I need is actually necessary for happiness." Planning the first community workshop felt like stepping into territory that extended far beyond their personal project into the realm of social activism and educational programming. Families from across the region had requested hands-on instruction in tiny home construction, sustainable living techniques, and the problem-solving approaches that had made their transformation possible. The logistics were complex: organizing, materials for multiple projects, coordinating instruction that could accommodate various skill levels, and providing childcare that would allow parents to focus on learning construction techniques. But the opportunity to multiply their impact by teaching others to create their own housing solutions felt like the natural evolution of everything they had learned. Anna Harris volunteered to coordinate food service and childcare arrangements, her teaching background proving invaluable for managing the educational aspects of the program. Victor Brown researched insurance requirements and legal considerations that would protect both participants and instructors during hands-on construction activities. "This is becoming bigger than just our story," Aibeleen reflected during one of their planning meetings, surrounded by registration forms from families hoping to attend their workshop. "People are looking to us for answers to problems that affect entire communities." The weight of that responsibility was both inspiring and intimidating. Their personal journey of survival and self-sufficiency was evolving into something that could influence housing policy, educational approaches, and community responses to families facing economic challenges. Marcus's birthday celebration had been shared by millions of viewers who found meaning in watching a mother and son create joy from materials that others had discarded as worthless. The simple cake, Homemade decorations and genuine happiness they demonstrated provided a powerful contrast to cultural messages about what children needed to have fulfilling celebrations. "This was the best birthday I ever had," Marcus told the camera during the video's conclusion, his words carrying sincerity that resonated with viewers who recognized authentic contentment when they witnessed it. Not because of what we got, but because of what we built together. The video's viral success brought media attention that extended their influence beyond their YouTube audience to include mainstream news coverage, magazine articles, and television appearances that introduced their story to viewers who might never have discovered them through social media algorithms. Interview requests arrived from national morning shows, documentary producers, and journalists working on stories about alternative housing, childhood resilience, and creative responses to economic adversity. Each opportunity promised expanded reach for their message, but required time away from the construction work and community engagement that remained their primary passion. "We're getting famous for building our home," Marcus observed with the matter-of-fact tone he brought to most situations. "But we still need to keep improving it and helping other people learn how to build theirs." His perspective reminded Aibeleen that their growing platform was meaningful only if it served their original mission of demonstrating that ordinary people could create extraordinary solutions when circumstances demanded resourcefulness and determination. The online community that had formed around their videos included professional contractors sharing technical advice, families documenting their own alternative housing projects, and individuals offering encouragement and support to anyone facing housing challenges. The comment section of each video had become a forum for sharing resources, troubleshooting construction problems, and celebrating successes achieved by people inspired by their example. Winter preparation for their second year in the bus involved improvements based on experience gained during their first seasonal cycle, better insulation in vulnerable areas, upgraded heating efficiency, and improved water system protection reflected their growing expertise and commitment to continuous improvement rather than mere survival. "We're not just living differently anymore," Aibeleen noted while installing enhanced weatherproofing around their windows. "We're living better than we ever did in conventional housing because everything here is exactly what we need and nothing we don't." The efficiency and functionality of their space had evolved through use and refinement into something that served their lifestyle more effectively than the traditional house they had lost to foreclosure. Every surface had been designed for their specific needs, every system optimized for their particular patterns of daily activity. Evening conversations now included discussions about their responsibility to the growing community of people who looked to them for inspiration and practical guidance. Messages arrived from families who had started their own bus conversions, teachers incorporating their story into lessons about problem-solving and resilience, and policymakers researching alternative approaches to affordable housing challenges. "Sometimes I feel like we're not just building a home anymore," Aibeleen admitted during one of their reflection sessions. "We're building an example of what's possible when people refuse to accept that their circumstances have to limit their possibilities." The toolbox that had started their journey continued to serve daily use, but its contents had been supplemented by specialized tools that reflected their developing expertise. What had begun as basic survival had evolved into skilled craftsmanship that attracted paying work and teaching opportunities that generated income while serving their community. Their story was inspiring similar projects across the country and around the world, as families discovered that creative solutions could provide not just adequate shelter, but genuine homes that reflected their values and priorities. The movement they had inadvertently started was growing beyond anything they had imagined when they first decided to see possibility in a rusty old school bus sitting forgotten in a Montana field. The corporate partnership proposal arrived in scenes, a leather portfolio that looked expensive enough to pay for a month of their living expenses, delivered by a man in a tailored suit who seemed uncomfortable standing beside their converted bus. Marcus watched from the window as his mother examined documents that promised wealth beyond anything they had imagined possible, but also threatened to transform their authentic story into commercial entertainment designed to sell products rather than inspire genuine change. Home Builder Corporation is prepared to offer you a very substantial monthly payment for exclusive endorsement rights, the representative explained, his tone suggesting that refusal of such an opportunity would be evidence of poor judgment rather than principled decision-making. We're talking about financial security that would allow you to move into conventional housing while maintaining your online presence as a marketing platform for our products. The numbers were staggering. Enough money to purchase a traditional house, fund Marcus's college education, and provide security that would eliminate every concern about their financial future. But the contract language revealed expectations that would transform their videos from authentic documentation into advertising content designed to promote specific products and lifestyle choices. You'd be our primary spokesperson for alternative living solutions, the representative continued, appearing at trade shows, filming promotional content, and generally representing our brand to the demographic you've successfully cultivated through your YouTube channel. Aibeleen studied the documents with careful attention, her administrative background helping her understand the legal implications of what appeared to be generous compensation for work they were essentially already doing. But embedded within the attractive financial terms were requirements that would change everything about how they shared their story and what message their content would communicate. "What if families couldn't afford your products?" she asked. Her question highlighting the fundamental conflict between their mission of helping people with limited resources and a corporation's interest in promoting expensive solutions to housing challenges. "That's really not our target market," the representative replied, with unconscious honesty that revealed how little his company understood about the people who followed their videos. "We're focused on customers who have disposable income for quality alternative living products, not people who are actually homeless or facing genuine financial hardship." Marcus, listening from his bedroom area where he was supposedly completing homework, emerged with the observation that often cut through adult complications with startling clarity. "So they want to pay us to help sell expensive stuff to people who don't actually need help figuring out how to build homes from things other people threw away." His question captured the essential contradiction that made the corporate offer both financially attractive and fundamentally incompatible with everything they had learned about their responsibility to their community of viewers. Their audience included people facing genuine housing challenges, not affluent consumers shopping for lifestyle accessories. The conversation continued through dinner and into the evening, with Aibeleen weighing financial security against authentic impact, while Marcus asked questions that revealed his understanding of issues that adults often struggled to articulate clearly. "If we took their money, would we still be helping people who really need help?" he asked, his 10-year-old wisdom cutting directly to the heart of the ethical dilemma they faced. "Or would we just be helping a company sell products to people who can already afford to buy whatever they want?" He continued, his questions demonstrating moral reasoning that impressed his mother and clarified her own thinking about their obligations and priorities. The discovery that other families were replicating their bus conversion model came through. Messages from viewers who shared photos and videos of their own projects, inspired by the techniques and approaches they had demonstrated through their documentation. Children across the country were learning construction skills by helping their parents create homes from salvaged materials, proving that their example was generating real change in how families approached housing challenges. "Look at this," Marcus said, showing his mother a video from a family in Oregon who had converted an old delivery truck into a comfortable home using techniques they had learned from watching their YouTube channel. They did everything we did, but they made it work for their family in their own way. The pride he felt in knowing their work was helping other families achieve housing security was evident in his voice and expression, demonstrating that the most meaningful compensation for their efforts came from knowing they were making genuine differences in people's lives rather than generating profit for corporate sponsors. David's return came without warning on a Thursday evening in March, his knock on their bus door interrupting their quiet routine of homework and construction planning. 18 months had passed since he'd left them to face foreclosure alone, time that had transformed both Aibeleen and Marcus in ways that made his sudden reappearance feel like an intrusion from a past they had learned to live without. "I made a mistake," he said, his words carrying the weight of someone who had spent months preparing for this conversation. "I should have stayed to help you figure things out, instead of running away when everything got difficult." His appearance suggested hard months, thinner than she remembered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of consequences for choices that had seemed easier than confronting problems directly. But his presence also reminded Aibeleen of the man she had married, someone who had once shared her dreams of building a stable family life. "I heard about what you've accomplished," he continued, gesturing toward the bus interior that reflected hundreds of hours of careful construction and thoughtful design. "I saw your videos, read the articles about your project. You've done something incredible here, something I never could have imagined." Marcus listened from his homework area with the careful attention he gave to all adult conversations that might affect his security and stability. His relationship with his father had been complicated by abandonment at the moment when family unity was most crucial, and his wariness was evident in his posture and expression. "I want to come back," David said, his request carrying implications that extended beyond personal relationships to include their growing online presence and the income opportunities that had developed around their story. "I want to be part of what you're building, both here and with all the people who are following your work." The conversation stretched late into the evening, with David explaining his time away and his desire to participate in the success they had created without him. But his interest seemed focused on the financial opportunities rather than the daily work of helping families learn to create their own housing solutions. "You left when we needed you most," Aibeleen said, her words carrying hurt that had been carefully processed during the months when she had learned to manage both construction challenges and single parenthood simultaneously. "We figured out how to survive and then thrive without you, and I'm not sure there's room in what we've built for someone who sees opportunity where we see responsibility." The community response to David's return was immediate and protective, with Anna Harris, Victor Brown, and James Smith all expressing concern about his motivations and the potential impact of his presence on the stability Marcus had found in their unconventional but secure living situation. "He wasn't here for the hard work," Anna observed, with the directness that had made her friendship valuable during their most challenging months. "Now that there's money and recognition involved, suddenly he wants to be part of the family again? That doesn't sit right with me." Victor's legal perspective added another layer of concern about how David's return might complicate their growing business relationships and educational programming. "You've built something here that belongs to you and Marcus," he pointed out. "Don't let anyone convince you that you owe them a share of what you created after they chose not to be part of the solution." James Smith's professional assessment focused on Marcus's well-being and the importance of protecting the stability that had allowed him to thrive academically and emotionally despite their unconventional living arrangement. "Marcus has developed remarkable resilience and self-confidence during this period," he observed. "Any changes to his living situation should be evaluated based on what serves his long-term interests, not what makes adults feel better about their past choices." The decision crystallized during a weekend when corporate representatives, David, and their growing community of supporters all seemed to be pulling them in different directions that prioritized external interests over their own values and objectives. "I know what we should do," Marcus announced during one of their evening planning sessions, his voice carrying the certainty that came from months of participating in decisions that affected their shared future. "We should keep doing what we started doing, helping families learn to build homes they can afford, and not worry about making other people rich or famous." His words reminded Aibeleen that their original goal had been creating housing security for themselves, while demonstrating that resourcefulness and determination could triumph over circumstances that seemed hopeless. Everything else, the online following, the media attention, the financial opportunities, was secondary to their primary mission of showing that ordinary people could create extraordinary solutions when necessity demanded innovation. The rejection of the corporate sponsorship was communicated through Victor's legal office, with language that protected their right to continue their educational work while declining partnerships that would compromise their authentic relationship with their audience. "We appreciate your interest in our work," the letter stated, "but our primary obligation is to the families who look to us for practical assistance with housing challenges, not to shareholders who view those challenges as marketing opportunities." So the announcement of their non-profit organization came through a video that explained their decision to formalize their educational work while maintaining independence from commercial interests that might compromise their mission. New foundations will help families learn to create affordable housing using recycled materials and sustainable techniques, Aibeleen explained to the camera, with Marcus beside her holding architectural drawings they had created together. "Our goal is teaching people to build homes they can afford, not selling them products they can't." The response from their community was overwhelmingly supportive, with donations and volunteer offers pouring in from viewers who understood the difference between authentic assistance and commercial exploitation. Their subscriber count continued to grow, but more importantly, families across the country were successfully completing their own alternative housing projects using techniques and approaches they had learned through the educational content New Foundations provided. The non-profit charter documents arrived on a crisp April morning, official papers that transformed their personal journey into a formal organization dedicated to helping families create affordable housing solutions. Aibeleen held the certificate establishing New Foundations with the same careful attention she had once given to Marcus's birth certificate, understanding that both documents represented new lives beginning under her protection and guidance. "We're official now," Marcus said, examining the paperwork with the seriousness he brought to all documents that affected their shared future. New Foundations is a real organization that can help real families build real homes. The legal formalities had been complex, requiring incorporation documents, tax-exempt status applications, and insurance policies that protected both their volunteers and the families they would serve. Victor Brown's legal expertise had proved invaluable in navigating regulatory requirements that seemed designed to discourage rather than support grassroots educational initiatives. But the bureaucratic challenges paled beside the logistical complexity of organizing their first major workshop, a weekend event that would bring 50 families to learn hands-on construction techniques, sustainable living approaches, and problem-solving strategies that could help them create their own housing solutions. Registration applications had arrived from across the region and beyond, families facing every imaginable housing challenge, who saw their story as evidence that determination and resourcefulness could overcome circumstances that seemed hopeless. Single mothers escaping domestic violence, elderly couples on fixed incomes, young families priced out of conventional rental markets, and individuals with disabilities seeking accessible housing alternatives had all requested spots in their program. Every one of these applications represents people who need help, Aibeleen reflected, while reviewing the registration forms that detailed each family's specific circumstances and goals. We're not just teaching construction techniques anymore. We're providing hope to people who don't have many other options. The responsibility felt enormous, extending far beyond their original mission of documenting their own renovation project, to encompass the housing security and future stability of dozens of families who were trusting them with their dreams and limited resources. Materials procurement for 50 simultaneous construction projects required coordination that challenged every organizational skill Aibeleen had developed during her administrative career. Lumber, hardware, electrical supplies, and tools had to be ordered, delivered, and organized in quantities that would support multiple learning stations while staying within their non-profit budget. Tom Rodriguez from the salvage yard became their primary supplier, offering materials at cost and volunteering his delivery trucks to transport supplies to their workshop location. His generosity reflected the community investment that had grown around their mission, people contributing time and resources because they believed in what New Foundations was trying to accomplish. You've got something here that goes way beyond one family fixing up a bus, he observed, while coordinating material deliveries for the workshop. You're teaching people that they don't have to be victims of circumstances, that they can create solutions even when everything seems stacked against them. The workshop location came through unexpected community support when a local church offered their fellowship hall and adjacent grounds for the weekend event. The space provided indoor meeting areas for instruction and outdoor work areas where families could practice construction techniques on actual building projects they would take home. Anna Harris coordinated volunteer recruitment, drawing on her teaching background and community connections to organize instructors who could provide expertise in specialized areas like electrical work, plumbing, and sustainable energy systems. Her ability to match volunteer skills with workshop needs ensured that each family would receive personalized attention and support throughout their learning experience. We've got retired contractors, current tradespeople, and experienced do-it-yourselfers all volunteering their weekends to help families they've never met, she reported during one of their planning meetings. The community response has been incredible. The volunteer orientation sessions revealed the depth of commitment people felt toward their mission. Instructors arrived with carefully prepared lesson plans, donated materials, and genuine enthusiasm for sharing knowledge that could transform lives through practical education. James Smith's involvement had expanded beyond his original role as advocate for Marcus's well-being to include program development and family support services that would help workshop participants succeed with their projects after returning home. His professional background in social services provided insights into the complex challenges families faced when attempting major life changes. Housing is just one piece of family stability, he explained. During their program planning discussions, we need to provide ongoing support that helps families navigate the financial, legal, and social challenges that come with alternative living arrangements. Media attention was intensifying as their workshop date approached, with national news, organizations requesting permission to document the event and interview participants about their housing challenges and hopes for solutions. The coverage promised expanded reach for their educational mission, but also threatened to turn their weekend program into a media spectacle rather than a focused learning experience. People are coming here to learn how to build homes for their families, Marcus observed during discussions about media access. They're not coming to be on television or to make other people famous. Maybe we should focus on helping them instead of letting reporters turn this into entertainment. His perspective reminded everyone involved that their primary obligation was to the families who had traveled long distances and invested limited resources in attending their workshop, not to journalists seeking compelling content for their publications or broadcasts. The corporate pressure continued, despite their rejection of the initial sponsorship offer, with different companies approaching them through intermediaries who suggested that their non-profit status might make partnership arrangements more palatable. Equipment manufacturers offered free products in exchange for promotional consideration, and media companies proposed documentation deals that promised revenue for their educational programs. They keep coming back because they know we have something invaluable, Aibeleen explained to their advisory board, which had grown to include Victor, Anna, James, and several community members who provided guidance on program development and organizational management. But what we have is valuable precisely because it's not commercial, because people trust that we're helping them rather than trying to sell them something. The pressure was particularly intense because their non-profit budget was limited and donations, while generous in spirit, were insufficient to fund programs at the scale their waiting list demanded. Corporate partnerships could provide financial resources that would allow them to help more families, but only at the cost of compromising the authentic relationships that made their educational content meaningful to people facing genuine housing challenges. Workshop preparation intensified during the final weeks before the event, with daily deliveries of materials, equipment set up that transformed the church grounds into an outdoor classroom, and final confirmations from families who had arranged childcare, transportation, and time away from work to participate in their program. 50 families are counting on us to teach them something that could change their lives, Aibeleen reflected while reviewing the final logistics checklist. Some of them have never used tools before. Some of them have never built anything. And all of them are hoping that this weekend will give them skills they need to create housing security for their children. The weight of that responsibility was balanced by excitement about the potential impact of teaching practical skills to people who could multiply their influence by sharing knowledge with their own communities. Each family that learned to create affordable housing solutions would become a resource for neighbors and friends facing similar challenges. Marcus's role in the workshop planning had evolved from assistant to co-instructor, with his own teaching stations designed specifically for children whose parents were participating in adult construction activities. His presentations about problem-solving approaches and creative use of recycled materials had been refined through practice sessions that impressed the adult volunteers with his communication skills and technical knowledge. "I've been building and fixing things for over a year now," he explained during one of the volunteer training sessions. "I want to teach other kids that they can learn to use tools safely and help their families build better homes." His confidence in addressing adult audiences reflected the maturity that had developed through months of genuine responsibility and meaningful contribution to their family's survival and success. The workshop would provide an opportunity for him to share that growth with children, whose circumstances paralleled his own experience of learning resilience through practical challenge. Evening planning sessions had grown to include detailed contingency preparations for weather challenges, equipment failures, and the inevitable complications that arose when 50 families attempted to learn complex skills simultaneously. Their experience with their own renovation project had taught them that flexibility and problem-solving ability were more valuable than perfect planning. "Something will go wrong," Aibeleen told their volunteer team during final preparations. "Multiple things will probably go wrong, but that's actually good because learning to solve unexpected problems is one of the most important skills we can teach these families." The volunteer team had grown to include expertise in every area families might need: construction techniques, sustainable energy systems, water management, waste disposal, and legal requirements for alternative housing arrangements. Their combined knowledge represented decades of experience that would be concentrated into a single weekend of intensive education. Registration confirmations revealed the diversity of families who would participate in their program. Geographic origins ranged from urban areas where housing costs exceeded family incomes to rural regions where conventional construction services were unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Age ranges included young parents with toddlers and grandparents raising grandchildren, all united by circumstances that required creative solutions to housing challenges. These families represent every demographic and every region, James Smith observed, while reviewing participant information. Housing affordability has become a universal challenge that affects people regardless of their background or location. The stories shared in registration applications were both heartbreaking and inspiring. Families living in cars while saving for rental deposits, multi-generational households crowded into spaces too small for their needs, and individuals with disabilities, seeking accessible housing that conventional markets failed to provide. Each application represented someone who had decided that learning to build their own housing solution was preferable to accepting inadequate alternatives. Corporate sponsors made final attempts to associate their products with the workshop through equipment donations that came with promotional requirements. The offers were substantial: professional-grade tools, high-end materials, and monetary support that could significantly enhance the educational experience they were able to provide. "They're offering us $10,000 worth of equipment," Victor reported during their final planning meeting, "but they want prominent logo placement, product demonstrations during instruction, and access to participant contact information for follow-up marketing." The decision was unanimous among their advisory board. Educational integrity was more valuable than corporate equipment, and families attending their workshop deserved instruction focused on their needs rather than promotional content designed to generate sales leads for commercial sponsors. "We'll make do with borrowed tools and donated materials," Aibeleen decided. "Our participants are investing their time and hope in what we're teaching. We owe them authentic education, not advertising disguised as instruction." The final week before the workshop brought a flurry of last-minute preparations, final headcount confirmations, weather contingency plans, and coordination with local emergency services, who had been notified about the temporary increase in activity at the church location. Every detail had been considered and planned, but the complexity of coordinating 50 families in simultaneous learning activities remained daunting. "We've prepared as thoroughly as possible," Anna Harris summarized during their final planning meeting. "Now we trust that good intentions, careful preparation, and willingness to adapt will combine to create something meaningful for these families." The night before the workshop began, Aibeleen and Marcus walked through their setup at the church grounds, checking supplies and visualizing how the weekend would unfold. Learning stations were arranged around the outdoor work area, materials organized for efficient access, and safety equipment positioned for immediate availability. "Tomorrow we find out if we can actually teach 50 families to build homes they can afford," Aibeleen said, her words carrying both nervousness and anticipation about the magnitude of what they were attempting. "We can do it, Mum," Marcus replied with confidence that reflected his faith in their preparation and the community of volunteers who had committed their weekend to supporting families they had never met. "We've been preparing for this our whole lives, even when we didn't know it." His perspective reminded her that everything they had learned during their own housing crisis had been preparation for this moment, their first opportunity to share practical knowledge with people facing similar challenges, demonstrating that determination and resourcefulness could create solutions where conventional approaches had failed. The workshop materials sat ready in organized stacks, tools cleaned and sharpened, and volunteer instructors prepared with lesson plans that balanced technical instruction with encouragement and practical support. 50 families would arrive in the morning, seeking hope and practical skills that could transform their housing situations and their children's futures. The toolbox that had started their journey sat ready among the teaching materials, its contents now familiar tools in hands that had learned to create solutions where none had existed before. Tomorrow, those tools would help teach others to build not just structures, but confidence in their ability to shape their own circumstances through knowledge, effort, and mutual support. The workshop registration list stretched across 3 pages of carefully organized names, each entry representing a family who had traveled distances both geographic and emotional to attend their weekend program. 50 households from across the region and beyond had committed their limited resources and precious time to learning skills that could transform their housing situations and their children's futures. Aibeleen stood in the church fellowship hall at sunrise, reviewing the registration materials one final time while volunteers arranged learning stations in the adjacent outdoor work area. Her nervousness about the scale of responsibility they had undertaken was balanced by excitement about the potential impact of teaching practical skills to people who could multiply their influence by sharing knowledge with their own communities. The Rodriguez family drove 12 hours from Denver, she read from one registration form, 3 generations in a single hotel room because they can't find affordable housing that accommodates their elderly grandfather's wheelchair. Each registration told a story of housing challenges that conventional markets had failed to address, families priced out of rental markets, individuals with disabilities seeking accessible alternatives, and single parents trying to provide stable homes while working multiple jobs to cover basic expenses. Marcus emerged from the bus, where they had spent their final night before the workshop, his arms loaded with the teaching materials he had prepared. For the children's program, his confidence about addressing young audiences reflected months of practice and genuine expertise in construction techniques that impressed adults while remaining accessible to kids his own age. "Are you ready for this, Mom?" he asked, his voice carrying excitement rather than nervousness about the day ahead. "We're about to help 50 families learn to build homes they can actually afford." The first families began arriving before the official start time. Vehicles loaded with camping gear, tools, and the hopeful energy of people who had traveled long distances to participate in something they believed could change their lives. Children emerged from cars and vans with the wide-eyed curiosity of kids approaching an adventure, while parents studied the workshop materials with the focused attention of students preparing for an important examination. "Welcome to New Foundations." Aibeleen addressed the growing crowd, her voice carrying across the church grounds as more families continued to arrive. "Today, we're going to learn that housing security doesn't require wealth or perfect credit or approval from landlords. It requires knowledge, determination, and willingness to see possibility in materials that other people consider worthless." The opening session brought together participants whose circumstances varied dramatically, but whose goals were remarkably similar: creating stable, affordable homes that could provide security for their children while maintaining dignity and independence. Ages ranged from young adults just starting families to grandparents raising grandchildren, all united by housing challenges that required creative solutions. Volunteer instructors moved among the families during the introductory period, assessing skill levels and helping participants select learning tracks that match their experience and objectives. Tom Rodriguez supervised power tool safety orientation, while Anna Harris organized childcare for families with young children who needed supervision during construction activities. Some of you have construction experience, others have never held a drill. One of the volunteer contractors addressed the adult participants. "But everyone here has something valuable to contribute, and everyone will leave with knowledge they can use to improve their housing situation." The first construction activity involved basic framing techniques using lumber donated by local suppliers and salvage materials that demonstrated how to identify and evaluate recycled building components. Families worked in small groups with Volunteer supervision, learning to measure, cut and join materials using techniques that prioritize safety and structural integrity over speed or cosmetic perfection. Measure twice, cut once, echoed across the work area as participants repeated the fundamental carpentry principle while learning to use saws and measuring tools. The phrase had become familiar to Aibeleen during her own learning process, but hearing it spoken by dozens of voices created a sense of community and shared purpose that transformed individual instruction into collective education. Equipment. Challenges emerged within the first hour as the demand for tools exceeded supply, despite careful planning and generous donations from community supporters. Volunteer problem-solving kicked in immediately, with experienced participants sharing tools and instructors rotating equipment among learning stations to ensure that everyone had opportunities for hands-on practice. "This is actually good," Marcus observed while helping reorganize tool distribution, his comment reflecting lessons learned during their own renovation project. Learning to share resources and solve problems together is just as important as learning to use specific tools. Marcus's teaching station for children had drawn enthusiastic participation from kids whose ages ranged from toddlers who wanted to help their parents to teenagers who were genuinely interested in developing construction skills. His presentations about creative problem-solving and recycled materials captured young imaginations while providing practical knowledge they could apply immediately. "Who knows what this piece of wood used to be?" he asked his young audience while holding up a board salvaged from old shipping pallets. "A fence, a crate, part of someone's deck. Now it's going to become part of a home, because we can see what it could be instead of what it used to be." The children's responses revealed creativity and insight that impressed watching adults, demonstrating that young minds often perceived possibilities that experience had trained adults to overlook. Their enthusiasm for repurposing discarded materials reflected natural creativity that had not yet been constrained by conventional assumptions about what constituted appropriate building supplies. Media representatives had arrived despite requests for minimal coverage, their cameras and interview equipment creating distractions that pulled attention away from instruction and made some participants self-conscious about their learning process. The tension between documenting their educational mission and protecting participants' privacy required careful navigation throughout the morning. "These families came here to learn, not to be entertainment for television audiences," Anna Harris reminded one particularly persistent reporter who seemed more interested in dramatic stories than practical education. "Please respect their privacy and let them focus on the instruction they've paid to receive." Lunch preparation revealed the organizational strengths that had made their workshop possible, with volunteer coordination producing meals that accommodated various dietary restrictions, while fostering conversation between families who might never have met under different circumstances. Shared meals created opportunities for informal learning as experienced participants offered advice and encouragement to families just beginning their housing journey. "We started with an old camper trailer that leaked everywhere," one family shared during lunch conversation. 6 months of weekend work turned it into a home that's warmer and more comfortable than the apartment we couldn't afford to keep. Their story joined dozens of similar accounts as families shared both challenges and successes, creating an informal support network that extended far beyond the weekend workshop. Contact information was exchanged, regional groups were organized, and plans emerged for ongoing collaboration between families facing similar housing challenges. The afternoon sessions focused on electrical and plumbing systems, with volunteer instruction that emphasized safety and code compliance while demonstrating techniques for installing basic utilities in alternative housing arrangements. The complexity of these systems required careful attention and patient instruction that tested both teaching abilities and learning capacities. Victor Brown, coordinated legal and regulatory instruction that helped families understand zoning requirements, building codes, and permit processes that would affect their ability to establish alternative housing in their home communities. His presentations balanced realistic assessment of bureaucratic challenges with practical strategies for navigating regulatory requirements successfully. Every jurisdiction has different rules. He explained to attentive audiences who understood that legal compliance was essential for long-term housing security. But most officials are willing to work with families who demonstrate genuine commitment to safety and community standards. Evening. Approached with families making remarkable progress on their practice projects, small-scale models that demonstrated principles they could apply to full-scale construction when they returned home. The sense of accomplishment was evident in conversations and expressions as people who had never built anything discovered capabilities they hadn't known they possessed. "I actually wired a light switch that works," one grandmother announced with pride that reflected months of doubt about her ability to learn technical skills. "If I can do this, I can probably figure out how to wire my whole tiny house." The day's success was measured not just in skills transmitted, but in confidence built. As families who had arrived feeling overwhelmed by housing challenges left evening sessions with concrete plans and genuine optimism about their ability to create solutions that would serve their specific needs and circumstances. The group photograph captured 50 families with their completed tiny home models, each miniature structure representing hours of focused learning and collaborative problem-solving that had transformed strangers into a community united by shared purpose and mutual accomplishment. Children held small-scale houses they had helped design and build, while parents displayed models that incorporated everything they had learned about framing, electrical systems, and sustainable design principles. "This is what we built together," Marcus announced to the assembled families, his voice carrying across the church grounds as the second day of their workshop drew to a close. "Not just these models, but the knowledge that we can create homes that work for our families, no matter what challenges we're facing." The breakthrough moments had come throughout the morning, as families who had struggled with specific techniques suddenly understood principles that had seemed impossibly complex. During initial instruction, a single mother from Wyoming successfully installed plumbing connections that would allow her to create a functional bathroom in the trailer she was converting. An elderly couple from Idaho completed electrical circuits that would provide safe, adequate power for the cabin they were building on their rural property. "I thought electrical work was something only professionals could do," the elderly gentleman confided to his volunteer instructor. "But understanding basic principles makes it feel possible rather than impossible. We can actually create a home that has everything we need." Marcus's teaching abilities had inspired children whose ages ranged from preschoolers to teenagers. His presentations about problem-solving and creative material use generating enthusiasm that impressed both parents and volunteer instructors. His natural communication skills and genuine expertise in construction techniques had created learning experiences that engaged young minds while building practical capabilities they could use immediately. "Marcus taught me that building things is just solving problems one step at a time," a 10-year-old announced to her parents, her words reflecting understanding that would serve her throughout life, regardless of whether she ever built another structure. "And he showed me that kids can help with real work, not just pretend work." Aibeleen's authentic leadership style had created an atmosphere where families felt comfortable sharing concerns, admitting limitations, and asking for help with challenges. That extended beyond construction techniques to include financial planning, legal compliance, and family dynamics affected by housing instability. "You've made something that seemed impossible feel achievable," one participant observed during the morning evaluation session. "Not just the technical skills, but the confidence that ordinary people can create extraordinary solutions when circumstances require innovation." The completion ceremony began with each family presenting their model home to the larger group, explaining design decisions and sharing what they had learned during their weekend of intensive instruction. The presentations revealed creativity and insight that ranged far beyond basic construction techniques to include sustainable living principles, accessibility modifications, and community building strategies. Our tiny house includes space for my mother-in-law's wheelchair and my grandson's homework area, one family explained, while displaying their carefully planned model. We learned that we can design a home that works for 3 generations instead of trying to find something that already exists. National media representatives had captured powerful human interest content throughout the weekend, documenting transformation that extended beyond skill development to include confidence building and community formation among families who had arrived feeling isolated by their housing challenges. "This isn't just construction education," one journalist observed while interviewing participants. "This is empowerment programming that teaches people to see themselves as capable of creating solutions rather than victims of circumstances beyond their control." The corporate sponsor's final acquisition attempt came during the ceremony, with representatives appearing unannounced to offer immediate financial incentives for exclusive promotional rights to document and distribute their educational content. The timing seemed calculated to pressure acceptance during a moment when success might make commercial partnership appear more attractive. Homebuilder Corporation is prepared to offer substantial immediate payment for the right to package your educational materials into a marketable product line, the representative announced, his presence creating tension that threatened to overshadow the family's accomplishments. The community's unified rejection of commercial interference was immediate and decisive, with both participants and volunteers expressing clear opposition to any arrangement that would transform their authentic educational mission into marketing content designed to generate corporate profits. "We didn't come here to help companies sell products," one workshop participant declared, her words carrying the collective sentiment of families who understood the difference between genuine education and commercial promotion. "We came here to learn from people who actually understand what it's like to need affordable housing solutions." Anna Harris stepped forward to address the corporate representatives directly, her teaching background evident in her ability to maintain professional courtesy while firmly establishing boundaries that protected their educational mission. New Foundations exists to help families create housing security through practical education and mutual support, she stated clearly. "We're not interested in partnerships that would change our focus from serving families to generating profits for shareholders." Aibeleen's passionate speech about dignity, self-reliance, and hope captured the essence of everything their weekend program had accomplished, while articulating values that would continue to guide New Foundation's future development. 18 months ago, my son and I were homeless and afraid. She addressed the assembled families, her voice carrying emotion that reflected their complete journey from desperation to purpose. "We had tools, we had each other, and we decided that was enough to start building something better than what circumstances had given us." Her words connected their personal transformation to the potential for change that every family represented, demonstrating that individual success could multiply into community impact when knowledge was shared rather than hoarded or commercialized. Everyone here has proven that ordinary people can create extraordinary solutions when they refuse to accept that circumstances have to determine possibilities, she continued, her message resonating with families who had spent their weekend discovering capabilities they hadn't known they possessed. Marcus's presentation to other children about believing in possibilities showcased communication skills and technical knowledge that impressed adults while inspiring young minds to see construction and problem-solving as accessible rather than intimidating activities. Adults sometimes think kids can't help with important work, he told his audience of children whose parents were participating in the adult programming. But we can learn to use tools safely, we can solve problems creatively, and we can help our families build better homes if they teach us and trust us. His confidence in addressing mixed-age audiences reflected maturity that had developed through genuine responsibility and meaningful contribution to their family's survival and success. The workshop had provided an opportunity for him to share that growth with children whose circumstances paralleled his own experience of learning resilience through practical challenge. Evening celebration filled the church grounds with music provided by participants, food prepared collaboratively, and stories shared between families who would return home with both practical skills and expanded social networks that could provide ongoing support for their housing projects. Plans emerged for quarterly workshops that would allow new foundations to serve more families while maintaining the personal attention and authentic community atmosphere that had made their first program successful. Regional coordinators volunteered to organize local support groups and skill-sharing networks that would extend their educational mission throughout the year. This weekend was just the beginning. Victor Brown addressed the group during closing remarks, his legal perspective adding practical guidance about ongoing support that new foundations would provide to families implementing their housing projects. You're taking home skills and knowledge, but you're also joining a community that will continue to support your success. The commitment to quarterly programming represented expansion of their mission from personal documentation to systematic education that could serve hundreds of families annually while maintaining the authentic relationships and practical focus that had made their initial video series meaningful to viewers facing genuine housing challenges. Contact information was exchanged extensively as families organized regional support networks and committed to sharing progress updates that would help others learn from their experiences. The weekend had created not just individual learning opportunities, but a network of mutual support that would continue generating positive outcomes long after the formal instruction had concluded. Marcus's college acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in spring, 2 years after their first workshop had proven that determination and practical education could transform lives through hands-on learning and community support. The envelope bore the seal of Montana State University's engineering program, official validation of the academic excellence he had maintained while growing up in an unconventional home that had taught him more about problem-solving and resilience than any traditional classroom could have provided. "I got in, Mom," he announced, his voice carrying pride and excitement about educational opportunities that had seemed impossible during those first desperate nights in their rusty bus. "Full scholarship for the architectural engineering program, and they want me to help design affordable housing projects as part of my graduate research." The acceptance represented not just personal achievement, but proof that their alternative lifestyle had provided educational advantages that conventional housing arrangements might not have offered. His application essays had described learning construction techniques by necessity, developing problem-solving abilities through practical challenges, and understanding sustainable design principles through lived experience rather than theoretical. Study New Foundations had grown into a regional organization serving hundreds of families annually through workshops, online education, and ongoing support programs that helped people create housing security through practical skills and community collaboration. Their quarterly workshops consistently filled to capacity with waiting lists that extended months into the future, evidence of the widespread need for affordable housing education and support. We've helped over 300 families complete alternative housing projects, Aibeleen reflected while reviewing their organizational reports, numbers that represented real households that had achieved stability through knowledge they had acquired during New Foundations programming. But more importantly, Those families are now helping their neighbors and friends, multiplying our impact far beyond what we could ever accomplish directly. The ripple effect was evident in correspondence from across the country, former workshop participants who had become regional coordinators, children who had attended Marcus's teaching sessions and were now helping their own communities with construction projects, and families who had used techniques they learned through new foundations videos to help disaster victims rebuild homes after natural catastrophes. Their book deal had resulted in a practical guide that balanced inspiration with technical instruction, providing readers with both motivational content and specific guidance for undertaking their own alternative housing projects. The publisher had been chosen specifically for their commitment to affordable pricing and widespread distribution that would make the information accessible to people facing genuine housing challenges. The book is selling well, their editor reported during a recent phone call, but more importantly, we're hearing from readers who are successfully using your techniques to create homes they never thought they could afford. That's exactly the impact we hope to achieve. The speaking tour had taken Aibeleen to communities across the nation, where housing affordability had become a crisis, affecting families from every economic background. Her presentations balanced personal storytelling with practical guidance, demonstrating that individual success stories could provide blueprints for community-wide solutions to housing challenges. University appearances had been particularly meaningful, connecting with students who were researching affordable housing policy, sustainable design principles, and community development strategies that could address housing needs more effectively than conventional market approaches. Your work represents proof of concept for alternative housing models, one professor observed after her presentation at a planning school. But it also demonstrates the importance of education and community support in making those models successful for real families. The original bus remained parked beside their workshop facility, maintained as both symbol and functional museum piece that reminded visitors about the journey that had transformed desperate circumstances into meaningful work serving hundreds of families. School groups toured the bus regularly, with Marcus often serving as guide for students who were amazed that someone their age had learned to create electrical systems, plumbing installations, and structural modifications. This is where we proved that having very little money doesn't mean you can't have a real home, he explained to visiting children, his words carrying wisdom that came from lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. We learned that home is something you create through work and imagination, not something you rent when you have enough money. David's attempted reconciliation had resulted in peaceful but distant relationship that acknowledged past hurt while maintaining appropriate boundaries that protected the stability Marcus had found in their unconventional but secure family structure. His recognition that he had missed the opportunity to participate in their transformation came too late for meaningful reunion, but his respect for what they had accomplished allowed for occasional contact that avoided conflict. You built something here that I never could have imagined, he admitted during one of their rare conversations, his words carrying genuine admiration mixed with regret about choices that had excluded him from their journey. Marcus is growing up to be a remarkable young man, and I know that's because of the strength you showed when everything fell apart. Victor Brown had become New Foundation's full-time program coordinator, his legal background proving invaluable for managing regulatory compliance, insurance requirements, and partnership agreements that supported their educational mission while protecting their authentic focus on serving families rather than generating profits. I never expected to leave legal practice to work for a non-profit, he reflected during one of their staff meetings, but this work feels more meaningful than anything I ever did in private practice. We're actually solving problems for people, instead of just managing legal procedures that don't change anyone's life for the better. Anna Harris had expanded her role to include leadership of New Foundation's education network, coordinating volunteer instructors across multiple states, who provided local programming based on techniques and approaches developed through their Montana workshops. Her teaching background and community connections had proved essential for maintaining program quality while expanding geographic reach. "We've trained volunteer coordinators in 12 states now," she reported during their annual planning retreat, "and each region is adapting our materials to address local housing challenges and regulatory requirements. The model is working because it emphasizes local expertise rather than trying to impose uniform solutions." James Smith's documentation of their program outcomes had attracted attention from policy researchers and government agencies interested in alternative approaches to affordable housing challenges. His professional background in social services provided credibility for their success stories and helped translate their practical experience into evidence that could influence housing policy at state and federal levels. "The families you're serving represent demographics that conventional housing programs often fail to reach effectively," he observed while preparing research reports about their impact. "Single parents, elderly individuals, people with disabilities, and families in rural areas all benefit from education-based approaches that emphasize self-sufficiency and community support." The graduation speech Marcus delivered at his high school ceremony credited his mother's courage and vision with creating opportunities that traditional circumstances might not have provided. His academic achievements, community service record, and practical skills had impressed college admissions officers who recognized that unconventional experiences often produce exceptional students. "My mom taught me that circumstances don't have to determine possibilities," he told his graduating classmates, many of whom had followed their journey through social media and local news coverage. "When life takes away what you thought you needed, sometimes you discover what you're actually capable of creating." The final scene took place in the workshop area where another group of families had gathered for their first day of New Foundation's programming. 50 households representing every imaginable housing challenge, but united by determination to create solutions that would provide security for their children. Aibeleen watched the new arrivals with the satisfaction of someone whose personal transformation had become a renewable resource for helping others overcome similar challenges. Each workshop group included people whose circumstances paralleled her own desperate situation 2 years earlier, proof that housing insecurity affected people from every background and geographic region. "Welcome to New Foundations," she addressed the new group, her words carrying confidence earned through successful experience, helping hundreds of families achieve housing stability. "Today you're going to learn that having limited resources doesn't mean accepting inadequate housing. It means learning to create solutions that work for your specific needs and circumstances." The toolbox that had launched their journey sat ready among the teaching materials, its contents worn smooth by daily use, but maintained with the respect due to instruments that had made transformation possible. Marcus approached the toolbox with ceremonial attention, lifting out the folded paper that contained his grandfather's words about having everything needed to fix whatever life might break. "For my Aibeleen," he read aloud to the assembled families, "when life breaks down, you got everything you need to fix it right here. Love, Daddy." The message resonated with people who understood that tools alone were insufficient without the knowledge, determination, and community support necessary to use them effectively. But for families willing to learn and work together, those simple implements could build not just structures, but confidence in their ability to shape their own circumstances. Sometimes losing everything means finding what truly matters. Aibeleen concluded, her words connecting their personal journey to the universal potential for transformation that existed whenever people chose action over surrender, creation over complaint. The new workshop group began their learning journey as dozens of previous groups had started, with uncertainty about their abilities balanced by hope that practical education could provide solutions where conventional approaches had failed. Their success would depend on the same combination of determination, community support, and willingness to see possibility in circumstances that initially appeared hopeless. The cycle continued as knowledge passed from teacher to student to teacher, again proving that individual transformation could multiply into community change when people chose to share what they learned rather than hoard advantages for personal benefit alone.